citizenship. Gretch?
There's a showdown shaping up on Capitol Hill as Republicans try to stop $78 billion in automatic cuts from the Department of Defense.
This sequester will decimate our military at a time when our men and women are overseas fighting in a war, in a world that has become much more dangerous.
Meantime, Democrats appear to be using the threat of cuts as a bargaining chip.
The issue is going to be, do they care more about protecting these tax breaks for the very wealthy, or do they care more about protecting defense spending?
So is this political infighting putting our troops in harm's way? Virginia Congressman Randy Forbes is a member of the House Armed Services Committee. He's embarking on a nationwide tour to let Americans know the potentially disastrous effects of these cuts. Good morning to you, Congressman.
Good morning, Gretchen.
So, of course, let's remind folks why these cuts are in place right now. This is a result of members of Congress not being able to come together and decide on how to tackle our deficit. They had these automatic cuts in place, right?
Well, Gretchen, that's part of it. The president actually launched these cuts out way before that. Started with the $100 billion of cuts, then $400 billion of cuts. Then in just over 6 months, we will have $1 trillion of cuts to national defense, putting us dangerously close to the point where we can't guarantee the security of the United States or our allies. The Air Force says we'll be on the ragged edge. The Navy says we'll have fewer ships than we've had in 100 years. 150 to 200,000 pink slips to our men and women in uniform. Secretary of Defense says we'll lose over 1.5 million jobs across the country. That's pretty severe.
So yesterday in the House, you passed as part of the budget for this not to happen. But we all know that the Senate is ruled by Democrats who are not going to agree with the Republicans in the House, correct?
The Senate has fought us tooth and nail on this. The House Armed Services Committee passed a bill that would change some of these things back. The full House yesterday passed the budget that would stop it, but we're not very optimistic the Senate will come to the place and pass any budget. They haven't done it in years, and so we're not very optimistic they'll do it now.
So the cuts start in January, which is right around the corner technically. So what will you do?
Well, we're going to go across the country. We've got a tour. It's called DefendingOurDefenders.com website that shows what all these cuts are going to do. They put gag orders actually on some people in the Pentagon to stop them from even talking about some of these issues. It's a huge silence out there. We want to make sure men and women know across the country what we're doing. We hear a lot, Gretchen, about this 1% today of Americans. 1% of the men and women in this country defend the rest of us. They're the true 1%. They stand up for us every day. It's time for us to stand up and fight for them.
Wow, what a great point. I hadn't thought about it in that way. You also are here to talk today about the Congressional Prayer Caucus, because we've been focusing a lot on Fox and Friends on what's going on at Vanderbilt University, where they have this new policy in place where religious organizations don't necessarily have to be run by students who are of that religion. In other words, an atheist could run a Christian organization at the school. What are you hoping to do with that?
Well, Gretchen, we think Vanderbilt University has more important things to do than run Christian organizations off their campus. It's important to note that these organizations already let everybody in. You could have an atheist as a member of the organization. We're talking about the leadership of that organization, and Vanderbilt wants them to have to say that they would have someone who doesn't believe in their principles to be the leadership. What's really interesting, though, is they made an exception for sororities and fraternities, but they won't do that for religious organizations. The state of Tennessee passed a bill that said if we're giving $24 million of taxpayer money to organizations, they shouldn't be able to discriminate against religious groups. We're waiting to see if the governor of Tennessee will sign that or veto it. He's threatening to veto it.
All right, and of course that's called the all-comers policy.
That's right.
At Vanderbilt University. Congressman Randy Forbes, great to see you in town, in New York, face-to-face, bright and early.
Well, it's good to see
you.
you.
Have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you.
Let's go back over to Steve and Peter.
Thanks, Gretchen. Thanks, Congressman. Turns out